well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This is our inaugural Tiger Talk event, put together in collaboration of Rooster Springs PTA and the Council of PTAs. And I just want to start with a big thank you to Lindsay Booth, our PTA Aaron, the VP of Programs for the Council, thank you, Aaron, Christopher Schultz, our fearless leader of the Council of PTAs, who is working hard to help us all collaborate as PTAs across the district, which I think is an excellent goal. So the topic tonight is nutrition. October is Wellness Month for, I believe, the schools, but also our PTA focus area. And nutrition for kids and teens, helping them to eat well, to grow strong, and thrive throughout their development is going to be our focus for tonight. So I'm your moderator, Lauren Cayella. I am a council delegate for Rooster PTA. I also work with the SOSMS PTA doing their grants, their student and teacher grants. And in my private life, which increasingly has less and less time, I am an LCSW, so I do clinical practice, social work. We are thrilled to have an incredible panel here tonight. We just want to thank you so much for being generous with your time and your knowledge and your expertise, because we've received a lot of great questions from the community, so we're going to make sure we try to touch on all of those. And I think this is a topic that, although maybe people think they know, a lot about it, there's probably a lot of questions that we've all struggled with. I know myself personally. So things like, am I doing a good enough job as a parent to make sure that my kids are well-fed and eating balanced meals? Are they eating enough? Are they eating the right foods? And like everything in parenting, it's impossible to know that we're doing it right. But I think these panelists are going to help us get a lot of insights tonight. So I'll, without further ado, let you introduce yourselves, starting with Kate.
Hi, good evening. I'm Kate Peters. I'm a registered dietitian in private practice. I'm also a Rooster Springs parent. I have a second grader and one that will be kindergartner next year. My specialty within my practice is I focus on specifically treating eating disorders. I work with individuals who struggle with disordered eating. I also do some work with athletes, and I'm excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Amy Culp. I'm also a registered dietitian, and I live in Cedar Park. So, I know, way up there by Dallas. But I know Kate because we know each other from the nutrition world. About 14 years ago, went to Texas to work full-time as assistant athletic instructor for performance nutrition. And Kate took over the practice that I had in town. And so, but we're also friends too. And so that's kind of my journey. Before I was at UT, I also had a private practice in town, specializing in sports nutrition, eating disorders, general wellness for families. And then before that, I worked in public health, and so I have worked with parents, with children of really all ages, from infants on. So I have a little bit of background in that as well.
My name is Jordan Hicks. I am first and foremost a parent here of two boys that go to Rooster, Ava and Luca. They're first in kinder. And then my background in nutrition, kind of, more sports. I just retired from the NFL about 3 months ago, 10 years playing at the highest level, obviously. And then I went to the University of Texas, where I learned a lot, actually, from Amy. Amy was my nutritionist, small world. But yeah, we are, excited to be here, and can't wait.
Hi, I'm Dr. Dahlberg. I work at Beansprout Pediatrics. I'm at the Dripping Springs location. Been there about 3.5, almost 4 years. My kind of background in nutrition and health sort of came from my own personal journey I grew up playing soccer, played college soccer, kind of got into some personal training stuff. It all sort of led me to medicine, but it's definitely a big interest of mine, so excited to talk about it.
My name is Crystal Wynn. I'm one of the LMHPs, which stands for Licensed Mental Health Professionals here with the district. I've been with Dripping Springs for almost 4 years now. Before that, I was working in community mental health. I would say my specialty, I really love working with anxiety, but being in school districts, kind of have to work with everything. But I'm here representing our counseling community.
Thank you all again so much, and I think it's going to be so beneficial to have not only your professional expertise, but your lens for some of you who are, parents or just you've navigated in your personal life through athletics, through performance. So we're just thrilled. The way we're going to kind of move through the topics, we're going to touch on a number of things like how to navigate the emotional relationship with food, how to handle picky eating or just challenges that can come up, fueling for sports. Obviously, we have some pretty elite professionals in that area, myself not included, and struggling with body image issues, and definitely want to be flagging for parents some of the warning signs or things to look for that can tell you it's time to seek more support for professional help in that area. So first, we're going to touch on setting the emotional table. So this is around parenting and communication, around food, and setting the atmosphere in your home. So to start us off, I do think that maybe a one-word wish or one-sentence mantra that you might have that you want parents to take away with about what the atmosphere around food can be in the home, and what would you strive for them to feel leaving today?
I guess I have the mic, so I'll go.
Yeah.
I would say practice what you preach. I definitely think kids are very observant, and also just like practicality-wise, what you have in the house is what's available. So I think that's definitely one that goes a long way.
Coming from my background, I would say food is fuel. You get out what you put in. For me, it was always about max performance, but relating to my kids and our kids, right? It sets you up during the day, the next day. It sets you up to be able to study and focus and get a good night's rest before the next day. So food is fuel.
My word would be nourishment. So looking at food as like what it can do for you and how it can support you.
I love that. I use that term too, how we nourish ourselves from a fueling standpoint, and then where does all that other stuff fit in? But I think my biggest thing is don't believe everything you hear.
Mine would be learn to listen and trust your children's bodies, so they then learn to listen and trust their own bodies.
Okay. To that extent, maybe parents unintentionally bring their judgments about food into the equation, whether that's kind of labeling some foods as good or bad, and definitely, for younger kids, I think it's natural to try to explain things in very simple terms. So what is one practical phrase or strategy parents can use instead of moralizing food, labeling food, to help kids build a more neutral and relaxed attitude towards all foods? And you could start us off on that.
Yeah. So in my practice, and also as a parent in my own home, we really avoid moralizing food, so labeling it good versus bad. I even am hesitant to even use healthy versus unhealthy, just because it can be such a loaded, emotionally loaded term, especially with young kids. So in my own household, and a lot of framing I use when I work with parents of my young clients, is we talk about grow food versus fun foods. So you notice how there isn't really shame attached to either of those framing, but there's a clear defining of what those, I think we can all assume what foods are grow foods, what foods are fun foods, but when a kid is thinking about it, it's like all of those can find a place, but let's make sure we strike a balance between those.
Yeah, and I think what's important about that too is it normalizes, everyone wants fun food. There's nothing wrong with you if you want fun tasting food, but not every meal that you eat, you're gonna hear some stuff I still say, not every meal that you eat is gonna be a party, right? Not every meal is gonna be fun that you eat, and that's okay. So how you work in the growing foods and have intentionality around, I gave a tour of our nutrition center today to some MBA students, and they said, where's the dessert? And I said, we intentionally show how to moderate fun foods. And so we bring in fun foods for victory meals, and we bring in fun foods, several times throughout the week. We're teaching them that in our learning lab, in our teaching kitchen, which is our nutrition center. And so you can do that too, based on how often you're bringing those fun foods in. Or for our family, we go out and get ice cream because it's fun, versus having it around and just making those decisions on how often you're working those fun foods in. But yeah, I think it's perfect. Growing food and fun food, then there's no, shame about it.
I really love that. I'm thinking about how, when you go to a birthday party and you have no control over what's being served, and you can't even tell what your kid's eating from there, but that framing of like, well, this is a fun environment and we're gonna have access to lots of fun foods, and that's really helpful framing. So many kids, just building upon that, might resist a balanced meal, or might resist the grow foods and want more of the fun foods. So what would you say is the best way for a parent to communicate firmly and effectively without creating a battle or a power struggle? And what maybe specific non-judgmental phrases can parents say to a child who's I hate this, I don't like any vegetables, just, strong refusal. And maybe, Crystal, maybe you have some ideas on that for us, and Dr. Dolberg. Okay.
So some ideas of, if we're trying to stay away from moralizing it, right, of if we have picky eaters, letting them have some control over the menu too and having input of that. So we'll have some choices, and part of it too when I talk about parenting is, especially if they've had some input on what we're gonna eat and what the menu's gonna look like, and we're gonna have some options, they can have control over their portion, right? We don't wanna give them too much food, especially if they're picky eaters, to where it's gonna be like, I have to eat all of these green beans, right? Like that's too much food. So let them make their own plate, but also not offering other choices for the food. So like, this is what we're having for dinner. If you don't want to eat it, that's your choice. And not engaging in that fight of like, I hate this, of like, that's okay, this is what we're eating. And if they have like dietary restrictions or whatever, like you take that into consideration when you're making the meal, obviously. But just saying, here's what we're having, and not engaging in that argument.
So yeah, just to add to that, I think you kind of pointed out like giving them choices helps. Like involve them in the grocery shopping, right? Like if you can take them with you, instead of them just like sitting in the cart or playing, with something, maybe you say like, hey, I need to pick out something red tonight. Like let's pick out a red vegetable. Like make it about something other than the fact that maybe it's a vegetable or, like a not so fun food, and pick out something round or green, and that helps to kind of involve them in the decision. And then two, like, yes, like when you're at the table and they're saying like, no, I don't want this, throwing it on the floor, it's perfectly fine to start with like an empathetic statement. Like, I understand that you're upset about this, or you may not want to eat this for dinner. here are your 1 to 2 other choices, but this is what we're serving for dinner, like you said, and setting a clear boundary so that the child knows, like, hey, I'm either eating this or we're taking a bath, going to bed, and that's it. Because I think you can often fall into the short order cook of things, and you end up picking some out of the pantry because you're worried they didn't eat enough. But they will eat when they're hungry, and it's okay if they go to bed a little bit hungry. Next time hopefully you make a better decision.
And you can put the plate in the fridge, and when they get hungry, that's what they get to go eat. And I would just encourage you to stay with it, because the short order cooking or the constantly trying to find something that they want will not get better. Even as adults, they will continue to be picky eaters if they're not challenged with lots of variety. Nobody said parenting was easy, right? This is the hard part of it. Trust me, I get it. Teenagers too. It's very difficult when they get into those food jags and don't want something. And I definitely have put plates in the fridge and, okay, you're hungry, that's what you're getting. And it's hard, but I just encourage you to stay with it, because as you do, you will see the fruits of your labor later. That they'll be more adventurous eaters. You can take them to restaurants. They can, nourish themselves without you having to put that effort in later.
I'm gonna add one thing to that. Don't stop exposing them either, just because they say they don't like it or hate it. Also, a rule in our house is you can't say you hate something you've never even tried. Not saying they have to try it in that moment, but you can't say that. It also, research supports it takes about 8 to 15 exposures to a food to actually determine a true preference for it as well. Love to throw that one at my kids. Yes. And then I still use the division of responsibility as well. So Ellen Satter, how old is this now? 45
I still give
years?
that book for every baby shower.
Every baby shower. So Ellen Satter, dietitian, she came up with what's called the division of responsibility in feeding. And this is really simple, but really effective. Parents have their responsibility of feeding their kids is they get to determine the what, the when, and the where. The child gets to determine how much and whether. So you offer the food, this is what you're having, but they can determine how much of what's on their plate they want to eat, or whether they even want to try it. Stick to your lane, let them stick to theirs. You avoid the power struggle. They sense that pressure. Even parents, toddlers can pick up if their parents are like, this is so good. They're like, I'm on to you, I'm not even trying it. So just take the pressure off. It eliminates the power struggles at meals. And Crystal, I love your suggestion. I give it all the time too. Serving family style, letting them put their food. I think our kids eat way better in our own household when they can serve them their own plate, determine how much goes on the plate. It's a game changer.
Yeah, to that extent, I had been given some advice to involve the kids in cooking, the meal, and as a slightly controlling person about the mess in the kitchen, and my husband being the true chef, it would stress me out, but I noticed such a difference of them willing to try new things. My daughter and I made some very bizarre recipe last week that honestly, when it was done, I was like, I don't know what this is, and she loved it, and I just would not have expected it at all. It had spinach and pumpkin, I don't know. So I think cooking has been a trick that we've tried. Okay. Well, thank you all. Those are really practical tips. Along the lines of food and feelings that get involved with the sense of power, desiring power control, how does nutrition play into really all of their cognitive needs and development? And as increasingly the demands grow on them and what they're expected to do in school, sports, how can a child's diet actually impact mood, anxiety levels, cognitive function, and their sense of independence and control in their own lives? Crystal, that's probably a good one for you to start. Yes.
So, he was saying earlier that food is the fuel for our body, right? Like we need energy and that's where we get it from. I will say in the counseling department, if we have a kid coming in who's really dysregulated, sometimes we'll ask questions of like, when's the last time you ate? Have you drank any water today? To see like, is there some stuff going on of like maybe your blood sugar is really low because that can affect our mood. Looking at things, I've actually had conversations with kids recently about, you know, if your energy is really low, have you had your iron levels checked before? What about your vitamin D levels? Because that can impact the lethargy of like, is it really a deficiency thing or is it a depression thing? Because there's a difference between the two. And then also, when we are dehydrated, it does increase our cortisol levels, which is a stress hormone, and vice versa. When we're stressed, it can cause dehydration. So just keeping those things in mind of making sure our blood sugar is being stable, making sure we're staying hydrated, and hydration too can help flush out those stress hormones. So when kids have been really stressed out or highly anxious, we try to get them to drink some water, especially like cold water can help activate the vagus nerve, which helps you regulate. So those are some things that we do.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of gonna reiterate what you're saying, but yeah, I mean, of course there's like, you know, iron deficiencies and vitamin D deficiencies and certain things like that can, you know, lead to mood disorders or fatigue. But then I'm like even thinking like practically, like, have I ever been hangry before? Because that makes me pretty mad. Like, and I mean, like kids experience that, and just even as adults, like sometimes we're just not aware of that. That's maybe what we're feeling. So I mean, I think hydration goes a long way, and yes, just, you know, keeping steady blood sugars throughout the day, eating. I mean, getting into the nuance of things, like really carb-heavy, sugary foods tend to cause really high blood sugar spikes and really low drops, and that leads to you feeling kind of like those afternoon crashes. So maintaining like good, healthy blood sugars, fats, and proteins throughout the day are really important.
Yeah, there's probably a reason why the teachers save the cupcakes and things for the end of the day, right? Very understandable. So okay, great. And
One thing I say, I obviously in my practice work with some more extreme cases, but I always say over and over again with my clients, a starved brain is an anxious brain. Because I see that.
Yeah, that tracks. Okay, well, I think this gives us an overall picture of how important nutrition is and how much we all do as parents to try to navigate this. But when it comes to struggling with time and schedules and workloads and just the realities, when parents are rushing to assemble weeknight dinners, what are some simple, effective rule of thumbs to just putting that meal together? Yeah.
Well, you can talk super practically too, and then everyone that's a parent can. But one big thing that I would suggest is, even if you have your own nutrition goals, everyone should have the same meal, and you can achieve the same outcome if you have a nutrition, weight goal, wellness goal for yourself as a parent. You can still have the same meals that your kids should have. Like, there's no like kid meals and then adult meals is what I really encourage, because then you're just working harder, honestly, to get the food on the plate, and then it also makes it a little confusing for them. But you can just do the plate method as you're plating things, and whenever you're determining what to have, they need different nourishment based on, let's say they just had an evening practice. They're gonna need half of their plate filled with carbohydrates and a quarter with color and a quarter with protein. Whereas us, maybe if you have a more sedentary job, or you know, you just commuted for 45 minutes, you're sitting a little bit more, you don't burn as much fuel like that. You need half a plate of color, a quarter of carbohydrates, a quarter of protein. So your plate, just to build out your plate a little bit different, but you're making similar things. That's kind of overarching what I would say, but practically getting food on the table. You have quick ideas?
Chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. Hey, that is a meal as a dietitian I serve to my kids.
I think I ate that in my 20s for a lot of
I mean, and also, you know, sometimes it's being realistic, and what are your kids gonna eat? You know, and keep with the exposures, always have color. I think that's important, like have some fruit or vegetable. Have color on their plate so they're seeing that variety. But if it's strawberries and chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, like that's okay. Sometimes we just need those softball meals to get us through the week. Yeah, I mean.
I think people think they have to meal prep, you know, to be successful, you have to do all this prep on Sundays. Sundays is I get like half a day off in the fall, so I'm not gonna spend the whole day prepping food. But what I will do is I'm gonna be really excited on Monday when I have, you know, some veggies washed and cut and already put in the fridge, and some fruit already cut and prepared. And I kind of know what I'm gonna make during the week, and I've already ordered those groceries for pickup. I have a plan. So that's the biggest thing, is planning ahead. If you can prep, you can prep things like proteins that can go multiple different ways, and then quick cooking carbohydrates that you can go with that. And then you can roast a bunch of vegetables and then use those multiple different ways. But I think what we're saying is don't make it harder than it has to be. And if you're finding yourself going through a drive-through, you know, what's the healthiest option that you can find? And then maybe you balance that whenever you get home with some color, because you know, you're going through the drive-through that's the most available and the quickest with the shortest line. And then you're gonna add to that whenever you get home to balance the plate.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect segue, because next question is going to be, sometimes you just have to have the fast food meal options, and there's just no time for anything else. So, I don't know, how do you think about parents choosing the best available options, or just, you know, when they have to rely on that, how should they navigate it?
Yeah, I'm gonna add a little point onto the last one. I think like a good little trick is like color on the plate. Like just to reiterate that, you know, like, hey, do we have 2 colors on the plate, 3 colors on the plate? And no, like purple ketchup doesn't count. Like the fruits and veggies, and like counting those up throughout the day. You could even make a game of it, you know, like let's take off on our little chart how many colors we got in today. And then too, like sheet pan meals are really nice, you know, like literally you can even buy them in the bags at H-E-B, and they have a protein, a carb, and a fat in there. And I think it's kind of what you're getting to with like the color, the starch, and the protein, like having those 3 fundamental things on the plate are so important. But yeah, I mean, you know, sometimes it is just convenience and making your life easier, buying the pre-cut vegetables, like those kinds of shortcuts are nice. But yeah, I mean, to your point about fast food, I mean, sometimes you're in between practices. I remember my parents driving us all around to practice, and there was just never time. I think picking the simplest thing on the menu is good. You know, like if you want like a hamburger, right? Maybe you just pick the plain hamburger, we skip the sides or something, like, you know, so go with the simplest option. And now honestly, use ChatGPT, because you can go on there and be like, hey, I need a healthy or nutritious meal for my 12-year-old. Like, what's the best option at these 3 places in front of me? And it's pretty good at building it out for you. So.
That is a great idea, yeah.
And have just you know, I know a lot of people are running around to practices after, and we can get into ideas for sport-specific food, but it's really just food. And just have something in your car that you have, you know, snacks and things that you can add. You can supplement those meals with a cooler in your car that's filled with some easy grab-and-go things, because you're driving around for a couple of hours. So.
I think timing matters as well. You know, when I think about sports and I think about fast food, pre-sport game, whatever practice, probably isn't the best idea. You're going to be sluggish. You're going to be out there not at your best performance. And then, you know, even like super late at night. Like, I know for myself personally, if I was hungry, I'm like, I just need Hat Creek, right? Boom, we're going to drive through Hat Creek. Got to get something quick for the kids. It's not at like 9 o'clock. Where it's, you know, spiking that late, and it's affecting yourself the next day. You have time to metabolize, and you have time to to get through it, if it's at 6:30, 7, whatever it may be. So I think picking and choosing some of those times, and then, if it is fast food, making a moment out of it, right, with the family, taking the family. We go to Hat Creek, we let the kids run around for a little while they eat, and it's more than just, we made a bad decision on food. We had a moment with our family.
That's good, yeah, and I also really like the idea, we've been doing this a lot in our house, is supplementing, to your point, you get the basic thing that you need on the go, and then you can supplement, and we're in the land of first and second dinners, that's happening now, so I really like the idea of not putting the pressure on myself, I have to get it perfect in this one meal, and then I still have a chance when they get home to have the fruit, have some milk, have some, additional stuff.
I think too, when we think fast food, everyone's like McDonald's, right? That's like the thing of, I think we forget about sandwich shops. They're just as fast, and that's one of my go-tos for athletes. It's like, go get a sub. It's just, it's fast, but it can be a better option, again, timing-wise, for on the go. And then there are, like Chick-fil-A has got great options too with our kids. I don't think they'd be down for the grilled nuggets, but it's like, fine, get the normal chicken nuggets, but they love a fruit cup or they love a side salad. So it's like making that choice of maybe not the fried chicken nuggets and the French fries.
And then
But
teaching them what balance is like as you do. Awesome, thank you, that's really helpful. Okay, well, we're starting to talk about athletics, which is great, because we're gonna segue into this idea of food is fuel, and that our needs change as we develop and grow. So first, maybe just umbrella thinking about how do calorie and nutrient requirements like iron, calcium, change during stages of development all the way up through adolescence, and what are some, changes or just things to focus on that parents can do to make sure kids are getting all of those really important baseline nutrients? Dr. Dahlberg, I'm looking at you.
So youngest, like your toddler age, fats are really important for brain development. Calcium is very important for bone mineralization. So those things are super fundamental in the younger age. And truthfully, these things are true through all ages. They're just a little more prioritized at times. So trying to incorporate those, you have healthy fat options with your nut butters and your avocados, olive oil, that kind of stuff. Iron will come from a lot of meats and vegetables. Graduating up to more your preschool or early elementary ages. Honestly, a lot of times fiber is really important, the amount of times I've seen constipation. So fiber, again, getting your fruits and veggies in, things with skin have a lot of fiber, beans have a lot of fiber, that's a really important one, and then protein definitely becomes something to focus on. They need that fuel throughout the day, busy days, that's when you kind of start introducing sports and whatnot. Adolescent ages too, hormonal changes happen a lot. Fats are really important. Again, those same healthy fats are really important for hormonal changes and development and puberty. Again, still that bone mineralization is still really important for growth plates. So circling back to your calciums and that kind of thing. And then for any, not even just athlete, but all kids being active, we want them to get some exercise in. A lot of times though, those teen years tend to be those years. Carbohydrates are super important. I think they sometimes get a bad rep, but that is the fuel for your brain and your body. So trying to pick your complex carbs to fuel those kids is super, super important. And, still true for the proteins and fats, but that's how it kind of can change throughout time. And then just making sure that they're getting enough of that. It can be really hard. Honestly, unless you're getting blood draws or something, right? There's not a certain way to know. But just from a medical perspective, the first thing, we look at is going to be growth over time. First, specifically like weight, right? Because that's the first thing that's gonna fall off if you're not really getting enough, just enough fuel in general. And then, you know, if it's something that's prolonged, maybe height starts to fall off the growth charts. But those are kind of like the big red flags that I would say we see. And then, I mean, if you're curious or, you know, you don't know, like we can order blood draws. Those are things that can be done. Obviously, not all kids like that, but we can look into it. So, you know, it's something to bring up with your doctor if you really are worried about it.
Parents, you know, serve milk constantly, you know, so now I'm sure the guidance has changed of just where you need to focus to get all those nutrients. Actually comes from a wide variety of foods, is what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, I think even in general, like milk used to be glorified as this one, like calcium source. We have so many now. I mean, the variety of foods we see at the grocery store are significantly expanded with even like celiac options, gluten-free options, like all of that. So, I mean, alternative milks, all that kind of stuff. So I think, yeah, like variety is true for any age, yeah.
Okay, awesome. And then, as we talk about the changing demand on your body, definitely when you are a teenager, not only are you just, your body is developing, you need more fuel, but then you add in athletics. You know, my daughter she's running at recess, she is running, any moment she can get, it seems, during the day. She doesn't sit still, and then she goes to like 3 hours of practice. So it's a high demand. And what do you think are the most essential nutrients for athletes at that stage, and how does it progress throughout their career?
Yeah, Amy might know the nutrients most important, but I would say, I mean, look, the carbs are huge. She hit on the carbs. That's what is going to fuel you. You need to stay on top of the protein. Again, it's all balance, right? It's all balance, and it's finding a way to fit it in to that craziness of, you know, the morning routine, and then after school pickup, and going straight to the sport, and then having to figure out what dinner looks like. And it's finding ways to fit pieces in, and then supplement that throughout the day. So I know, you know, I've got little kids, right? My kids are first in kinder. They're not doing a ton, but they find time for snack for little kids. I know, you know, if you're taking if you've got a high schooler or a middle schooler, right, just packing a couple snacks, bars. What I used to do is just take RX bars. I'm spoiled, so I was always spoiled at UT, and in the NFL, we would have, they would legit have an entire fuel bar, right, where it's any bar you could think of, jerky, protein shakes, right, pretzels, whatever you need, electrolytes, you know, just so, and then we would get breaks during our meetings so that we could go fuel ourselves. We'd get up, we'd go grab a snack, so that you're just constantly having something. So I was never a breakfast guy. I would always do a morning shake, and there's plenty of shakes to figure out whatever, you know, goals or whatever your child may need. And then, you know, like I said, an RX bar during the day, some jerky, and then, you know, maybe it's a protein shake before practice and stuff. But it's just finding that consistency throughout the day so that you're not tanking, you're not spiking, you're staying in that steady level.
He was always like this, very prepared. Yeah. But that's what he's saying. It's like adequacy. It's like ABCs of nutrition, although it's not ABCs. It's like adequacy is first and foremost, then balance, then variety, then moderation. So if you're not meeting the adequacy, the balance of the other things take second place. So we have to look at adequacy first, because then the other things will fill in the cracks. But it's hard to meet adequacy. Like my swimmers, for example, they spend 4 hours of the day with their face in the water. That's not a sport that you can fuel very easily while you're doing your sport, and it's burning through a lot of carbohydrate, a lot of fuel. And by the way, they have to be there at 6 in the morning
do you want to get up and eat, 700 calorie breakfast at 6 in the morning? So to Jordan's point, it's like thinking through what your day looks like and what your needs are and what your kids' needs are, and being a little bit, finding times where you can do a little bit of preparation for that. So smoothies are a great idea. Smoothies and shakes are a great idea in the mornings for those athletes that have the morning practices, which will start happening in middle school, that you have to get up and take them to, those super early morning practices, and they don't want to eat. So what are you going to do? But remember, adequacy is the most important. So if you can get them to eat a peanut butter and jelly and a piece of fruit in the car on the way, great. You've done a great job, because adequacy is there, right? We're starting with that. And then finding ways to work it in, like he said, throughout the day, but being very prepared. Okay, put 2 snacks in the front of your backpack. Make sure you have one after practice, and then make sure you have another one before lunch. So helping your kids to think through that too, especially, I have one, my teenage son is like, we're looking at his growth charts. He has no appetite at all. And I'm constantly like, Scott, you gotta eat, you gotta eat. But when they have no appetite, to match what I know his needs are, it makes it really, really hard. So you have to be really creative of where are you gonna sneak in the healthy fats, and where am I gonna sneak in things so that he's not overwhelmed with the quantity that he has to eat to meet that adequacy. But to Jordan's point, write out your day, write out your kid's schedule, and where are you gonna sneak food in? Not sneak, but where are you gonna work food in so that you meet that adequacy? Because if you just, as we all know, right, if we don't plan, we fail, right? And so if our days get going and they get busy, and then we find ourselves behind, for sure.
Yeah, and that's very practical. I think when an athlete's not getting enough, they're not having the adequacy, sometimes, or I've seen this with my own kids, they mistake lack of appetite, right? Like it's lack of appetite, when in fact maybe they're just kind of crashing from not having enough. Or
you have to remember, as we were talking about with anxiety, nerves, adrenaline, all of those things impact appetite too. And so, with our athletes, you can't always use hunger as a cue for high-level athletes, for elite athletes. They're not going to feel hungry right before kickoff of a football game or at halftime when somebody just scored on them, So you gotta, those are very real things. Those emotions and the adrenaline going affects the central nervous system. So know your kid. And if your kid's a little bit more anxious and nervous and things like that impact their appetite, you could talk to them about that. You may not feel hungry, but a normal healthy metabolism wants to be fed at least every 3 to 4 hours with balanced nutrition. So if it's going longer than, and then some kids have a much higher metabolism and need to be fueled every couple of hours. And your kids, the kids, you know them very well, and then helping them to then know their own bodies too, like you were saying, so they can trust their own bodies as well as they're listening to it.
Okay, that's really helpful. Yeah, just a practical tip I learned from someone else, I can't take credit, is just having the well-stocked snack bag that's just portable. And then unfortunately we have to have multiple, because we gotta have them in this car, in this bag, but just knowing that I haven't forgotten to put all the things together for each game, and it's just there.
Accessible, yeah. Like he was saying, we have fuel stations everywhere for the athletes.
Right.
That's what you're doing for your kids.
It's a car fuel station.
That's right.
They force feed us. They would force feed us.
Okay, yes.
Because you're also with, especially teenage athletes, adolescent athletes, you're also chasing growth and development. So their needs are so insanely high. And then when you've got a kid that's just an intense athlete too, you're chasing them. And then they come in being like, why am I making my gains? I haven't gained any weight. I'm like, you're missing 1,500 calories, bro. And so it's a challenge, but so yeah, being crafty as the parent and just having it available, accessible.
Yeah,
is
that
key.
was actually a question that we received from the community, was around helping kids with healthy weight gain, for performance, for sports, or just, naturally, just as they're developing the expectation of just growing changes. So what tips do you have for ways to gain weight in a I'm trying not to say healthy.
You can say healthy. It's not a forbidden.
It's so hard.
Shame. I mean, exactly what Amy touched on, though. Yeah, intentional weight gain.
Yes, thank you. Good word.
Exactly what Amy said. Adequacy first. You cannot gain weight if you don't put enough calories in your body. So it's first figuring out how to put enough calories in the body, and then working on the balance and the variety.
Yeah, I think, I know, I've seen, good weight gain and bad weight gain, right? And there's definitely a difference. There's guys, who are playing tight end, who are weighing 250, they got asked to be on the offensive line, and now they gotta weigh 300 pounds, right? And it's like, well, what's my timeline? I gotta gain this weight in an off season, which is 6 months, or not even, right? Like, how do I do this? And so they just start stuffing themselves, and that is not healthy weight gain, right? And these guys often get injured because the body that was 250 now has to carry 300, and then they got to go out there and try to move the same way. So if it's, in my perspective, if it's for athletics and not health, then there's a perspective issue there. I think health should be first and foremost, and then it's that communication of, all right, how do we do this healthy? How do we communicate with the coach? How do we communicate, with the parents, just about how we can navigate this situation in the most healthy way and most natural way for the child? Because you don't want to, what's the use of putting on all that weight or whatever if your body can't handle it? If you put it on the wrong way and your body now fails you, And so I've seen that over and over. I think, maybe it's an alternative of like, hey, maybe this year we stick here and I just slowly get my way there till next year. Maybe we extend this timetable, but there's definitely a perspective there that you've got to continue to keep, that health, of the child should be first.
Yes, I mean, all of that for sure. And then the other thing, I would just warn you guys, as you're raising elementary age kids that are going to be in middle school and have access to things like YouTube and things like that, there's all kinds of information out there. And, I think we've done actually a pretty good job of preparing our girls around body image and the way the world sees us and that kind of thing. And I frankly sort of feel like we're failing our boys sometimes, and I've been seeing so much more body image disturbance with younger boys, with middle school, high school, and it's a lot of just bad misinformation of things that they're exposed to about how to look a certain way. When again, we've as females, we know like a lot of that is lies that we've been fed to look a certain way, and the boys just haven't been trained as well to have that filter to know what's true and what's not true. So just be ready to have those conversations, because they're being impacted pretty significantly on what's realistic and what's not. Six packs and washboard abs. I mean, if you want to be disturbed, you can easily find things on the internet for experts. Everybody eats, so everybody's an expert. Everybody has a platform of some sort, and everybody's selling something. So you just have to be just really careful and use your discernment and talk to your kids. We can't protect them unfortunately, from seeing all the things. Even if you protect them and not give them access to to phones and to social media and that kind of thing, it doesn't mean their friends won't have access or something like that. So learning how to talk to them about the things that they see, the things that they read, the things that they hear, and what is true and what's realistic and what's healthy and what's supportive for athletes and for a growing body is just really, really important.
I think that's a perfect segue to talking about the pressures that kids do feel, whether it's they get onto the team, for wrestling weight class or cross country, making sure you're monitoring body fat. I've heard a lot from students and parents about what kids face, and sometimes these conflicting messages. So, even just maybe what the program might kind of seemingly be emphasizing versus, yeah, focus on health first, or focus on what my parents are saying versus my coaches, et cetera. So how do you navigate that, or how do you think parents should navigate that with their kids?
It's definitely the expectation and the pressure to perform, right? I put myself back in high school and college and just think about, you know, the expectation that was on me, not just from myself, but from the people around me, right? My family, my friends, you know, the media, technically, everybody that had eyes on me expecting me to do X, Y, Z. And then on top of that, you think about, well, how can I get better? You're always, you know, as an athlete, especially as a high performer, you're trying to push the edge. And it's like, if you don't have anybody there guiding you and pouring into you, you're gonna do some things that probably you will regret down the road, right? And make some mistakes. And so I think, again, it's just the perspective of, you know, we have elementary, middle school, high school kids. This is a long game. This is not a moment of instant, you know, performance that we're trying to achieve. We are trying to achieve growth, and we are trying to achieve the long game of performance, what sports brings, right? And so, yeah, I know the pressures are real. I know social media is real. I had to get off of social media when I was in college, or when I was in the pros my first couple of years, because that pressure and that anxiety, you can only imagine, you know, this generation. So, yeah, I think it's having those conversations. I think it's being proactive and just constantly pouring into your kids and just saying, you know, we're not here putting more pressure on you to achieve or to perform. You know, what did you learn? How did you feel about the game? You know, and just connecting in a way that's not performance based all the time, but more, you know, one-on-one with your kid, with their soul, with what they're feeling.
And the conversations that you're having all the time are important. You know, I mean, you become way less wise when they're in middle school, but you laid the ground, hopefully, in elementary school, and then just the messages around, you know, I'll say all the time, like the best fueled, the best genetics, the best prepared, the best coached. You know, all of those things go into making a great athlete. But just trust your gut. If you see your kid making some significant changes in their nutrition because they're wanting to change their body to be faster, to be bigger, to be something, and you just feel like, I don't know if this is healthy, trust that and have a conversation. And reminding them about the adequacy, and the best fueled athlete is the best fueled athlete, and all those other things that go into it is going to make the whole athlete. But it's just paying attention and trusting your gut, and then having a healthy foundation at home. So if you have your own, you know, stuff that you need to work through in terms of body image and dieting and things like that, just making sure you're not projecting those dieting messages onto your kids, and working through some of that thing. You're not going to be perfect all the time, but making sure that you're kind of aware of that too. What is the language at home, so that you're setting them up with that foundation from the start, that this is what a healthy foundation looks like, from fueling and taking care of our bodies. I don't know if you guys have.
I am thinking about how you're saying that they are exposed to different sources of information, like the older they get. So they'll have coaches who are talking to them, and they'll have social media. But like, as someone who works with adolescents in my mental health practice, I always remind parents of that age, like, you think they're not listening to you, but they are. They just don't show it. And so around, you know, when it comes to messaging around food, you might think that their coach's voice seems more important, or their, you know, social media or peers, what their peers are doing, but they have to still hear from you. And even just having, you know, family meals when you do get the opportunity is still that modeling. And it doesn't get drowned out just by all those other voices, I don't think.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that, but I think, like, have the conversation first with your kids, so that they have to reconcile everything else coming at them with what you said, right? So that you're first to the punch, basically.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Okay, awesome. Are there any watch outs for athletes and parents to recognize when the pursuit of performance is becoming unhealthy or unsustainable?
I got the eyes. I think when you see your child riding the highs and the lows, right? It's the peaks and the valleys rather than being here. Again, everything is based off of my experience and things I went through and what I saw. The people who didn't hold their entire identity on performance and they were able to just be even, and you know, we've got kids, when they're able to be kids, right, and not feel the pressure so much, you know, where their joy is being lost, where their energy is low and they don't enjoy the same things that they used to enjoy, right? Like those are all real red flags. Because if they have chosen to pursue something and now all of a sudden it's like, I don't want it anymore, like it's real red flags. You know, we're here for nutrition, obviously weight loss, you know, I think that would be a real one. You know, just all these signs of extremes, you know, that come along with performance and come along with sports and really, you know, adolescence as a whole.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, that is kind of where we're going, which is the challenges and the flags. So we know that nutrition is connected to everything, including sleep, including academic performance, including enjoyment of your extracurricular activities. So how do sleep needs evolve, and how does that interact with nutrition for executive functioning, for school performance, for athletic performance?
I think that sleep needs are so fundamental. I mean, I can't state enough how important sleep is, and I think it's definitely a challenge a lot of times, even in little kids, right, who may like have struggle going to sleep or falling back asleep. And then too, in like those adolescent years when, you know, they're struggling to fall asleep or maybe on phones or up on video games or something like that. So stressing the importance of sleep is really important. So, I mean, I think setting your child up for a healthy sleep environment is probably most important. I mean, limiting screens an hour or so before bedtime. That artificial light is just going to tell your body to stay awake. Having maybe like some exposure even to like the sun setting can actually help, you know, increase some of your melatonin levels and decrease some of your cortisol. So getting out for like maybe a walk after you do dinner or something. Trying not to eat late, to your point, you know, if you have blood sugar spikes like an hour or two before bed, then it's going to be harder to fall asleep. Can you put blackout curtains? Can you dim your overhead lights, you know, maybe within an hour before bedtime? So those kinds of things. And then if you can find something that's relaxing for the child to do, and that's different for everyone, and maybe it's like, if you can find something that's relaxing for the child to do, and that's different for everyone, but maybe it's like listening to a song, or maybe it's drawing or reading or something that's, you know, again, like kind of, you know, calming to them, that can help fuel good sleep. But I mean, yes, like the sleep should not be understated. It is so important to mood, to appetite, energy, everything. I really think it's so fundamental.
Mm-hmm. And I would just say that they're all interdependent of each other. So when we don't sleep well, we're not able to regulate our mood well, we get more stressed. When we're stressed, we don't sleep well. And then same for nutrition too, right? Like if we're not having those needs met, then it's going to impact all of the things at once. And so just keeping that in mind of when one fails, it kind of is a catalyst for the rest of them.
Yes, don't give away that microphone, because we're going to follow up on that, which is we got a question from the community about this idea of how do you empower the kids to be able to use good decision making and executive functioning, especially like in those teenage years, because this parent was talking about how maybe you have a little more control, you know, as they're younger over things like sleep and what you're serving and what they're eating. But as they get older and are more independently making choices in the world, and maybe, you know, they crawl out of their room at like 12 p.m. and go back in, and you're not seeing as much of them. So how do parents navigate empowering their kids to make good choices about food out in the world?
I would say part of that is really just having that conversation with them of like, how is this impacting you? So, you know, I've noticed that you haven't been sleeping as well and you've been kind of cranky. Like, have you noticed that? And kind of putting that back on them of, these are the things that I have observed. How has that been for you? And kind of helping them process through that. And I would say too, like, while they're still in your home, you can set boundaries, right, for parenting of like, if the phone is keeping them up or electronics of, okay, here's our boundaries with this. Because especially, I know we've talked some about like social media and video games, and like those things are made to be addictive, and like when their brain's not fully developed, they don't have that impulse control to stop that, and they need some help with some of those things. And so putting those boundaries in, especially if that's what's contributing to it, and finding some ways to kind of help mediate that. But outside of that, it's really just, okay, these are the choices you're making. How are you feeling about them? How is that impacting you?
Well, for those that have still elementary school age kids, setting a good foundation, like starting early, modeling it, and then it just kind of generally continues to flow. And again, when they're at home with you, you can still say, this is what we're having for dinner because we're sitting down for a family meal when they're teenagers. And it balances out when they go out with their friends and maybe making different food choices, but it will balance itself out. It's not something I think any parent needs to overly stress about, because I think sometimes there's too much focus on it and it backfires. Or then there's like the secretive and the hiding and all that, and that doesn't bode well either.
Yeah, that's helpful. I do think that it ties in with the fun. You know, if you're out and you're with your friends, maybe you're having more fun foods, you know, and then finding the balance though, and reflecting on how it leaves you feeling afterwards. I need to do more of that too. So, okay, how about the early stages when it comes to picky eating? That's another challenge. So even though you might feel like you have more control at that stage, but there's a power struggle, how do you know when it's like genuinely falling off track and you should be worried about the level of pickiness, or the, you know, that they're just not getting enough of what they actually need?
Kind of to go back to the point again about like growth charts and stuff, obviously that's something we follow when we see you for like well checks, right? So we're looking at how the weight trajectory and the height trajectory, not necessarily like what you weigh tomorrow and what you weigh today sort of thing, right? Those are water fluctuations, but like over time, are you generally trending in a positive direction? There was a first part of that question I was going to answer.
Yes, just the picky eating and how you
Okay,
know when
when it's a problem.
When it's tipping towards not just
Sure.
developmentally appropriate, but something more serious.
I think most parents honestly have like a gut feeling, but I mean, if you're struggling with like, you know, we literally only eat chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. Like it just becomes so singular that you're unable to really deviate at all. Then obviously that's a big red flag. Having, you know, sometimes it's texture concerns even, like if we only take pouches, right? You know, and we won't do any kind of solids, like those are red flags. And I mean, again, I encourage you to like bring up any concerns you have, right? And if it's nothing, you'll get reassurance. But if not, like maybe we do need to involve nutrition or a dietitian or someone who can come into the home, or feeding therapy, something like that.
Okay. Yeah. And how about warning signs as kids get older into adolescence? How do you know when something is tipping maybe in the direction of disordered eating disorder, territory, body image that's more maybe severe than just developmentally?
I mean, I would say if it's a more restrictive eating disorder, I mean, up or down, significant weight change. So that's where I collaborate with every single one of my clients, pediatricians who are children and adolescents. I get their growth charts because I like to look at that. And if someone's falling off their curve, that's always been their growth trajectory. That's one of the main warning signs. Just a general, if you see all of a sudden your kid is very preoccupied with being healthy, losing weight, all of a sudden cutting out an entire food group, specifically like I don't want carbs anymore, I don't want fat anymore. And it can be really sneaky in the beginning. The number of parents that come to my office and they're like, this spiraled quickly because I thought my kid was just making healthier choices. Like my kid chose to cut out soda, great. And I don't want to say cutting out soda is a red flag, but it was the soda on week 1, and then it was cutting rice out, and then no bread, and then it spirals. Obsessively reading labels, wanting to be overly controlled in the kitchen, generally anxious. I mean, and again, I think parents just listen to your gut, and it's always better to just, again, check in with your pediatrician first, and they can help kind of suss out for you, but listen to your gut too. And I think earlier intervention is gonna have the best outcomes to nip it and overcome. Don't let it fester.
Crystal, do you have anything you want to add about working with school-age kids in that regard?
Yeah, I would just echo what you said. Like, if you have any concerns, talk to your pediatrician. On the school-based level, because there are medical concerns, that's not an area that we focus on. But we're happy to coordinate with outside people. So if the kid's gonna need to miss school for intensive treatment, or if we need to coordinate with outside providers, dietitians, we're happy to get releases of information and coordinate. But yeah, if you have any concerns, and if we have concerns too, like start with your pediatrician, right? Like, because it's a medical thing, it can have some serious consequences.
And I do think it comes down to dialogue again. Like if you're having conversations with your kids on a pretty regular basis, and then all of a sudden those conversations are changing or falling off, and they're suddenly talking a lot about, I've had too much of this today. I really need to have more of that, and just a little bit more of their hyper awareness of food, hyper focus on it, seeking control. Sometimes when kids are anxious or stressed, they look for the things that they can control, and sometimes eating is where that can show up. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. Okay, well, we have made it through all of our prepared questions, and I'd love to open it up to anybody who may have a question burning. Now's your chance.
Here's the question I get all the time. Should my... Yes, we are.
Jordan Hicks.
Yes. Sports drinks. Does anyone have questions about sports drinks? When you work in sports drinks? Yeah, when do we drink Gatorade, sports drinks? Okay. So just as a reminder, sports drinks were invented for a very specific reason, and they're very helpful for that very specific reason. I could not do my job and be successful in it if we didn't utilize sports drink. And it is for athletes that are working out at a high intensity for over an hour, especially in the heat. You have to maintain your blood sugar levels when you're working out for over an hour. And so that fast digesting carbohydrate, there's a time and a place for fast digesting carbohydrate. Pre, during, and post exercises when you need that. You don't want high fiber foods that take a long time to digest, because your blood is being shunted to your working muscles instead of to your gut. And so it can go through the gut very easily through those fast digesting carbohydrates. There's a reason why there's
3 different types of sugars, just because there's different transporters in the gut. Again, it makes it easier during high intensity activity when the blood is not going to the gut for the carbohydrate to still be oxidized and utilized as a fuel source. When your kids have a 30-minute soccer game and you're supposed to bring, the drinks and the snacks, you don't feel like you need to bring sports drink. You can bring water and fruit and get, a healthy snack for them to have after that. But teaching them the time and the place to work in sports drinks is very important. For my athletes that are hard gainers, I do utilize sports drinks even if it's not an hour-long practice. I'm working with a basketball player in my private practice right now, and he's trying really, really hard to gain some weight, to be recognized at the next level, to meet some specific goals that he has. And so
we're utilizing that as a way so that he doesn't get into negative energy balance in his day. He's maintaining that, even if it's like a 1-hour practice. It's obviously not in the heat, it's in the basketball gym, but we're utilizing that for that purpose. So they have a time and a place. So I always make jokes like, sitting around playing video games is not the time. We need to be drinking sports drinks. So there's a time and a place for them. You don't have to be scared of them. There's also a time and a place. There's a ton of electrolyte drinks on the market. A lot of them have way too much sodium for kids and even teens, honestly. We utilize them very strategically in the work that we do. We we measure the sweat and exactly how much sodium that the athletes are losing and trying to match that. But just constantly drinking the super high electrolyte drinks throughout the day isn't necessary. Teach your kids drinking water is delicious, because I can't tell you how many athletes come into college and that everything has to have a flavor. Am I wrong? I'm not talking about him. Not him. But so many of them, like water. I'm not like, where's the flavor? It's like, no, it's just water. We're just drinking water. And so a little bit about hydration. Yes.
I was just gonna say, do electrolyte powders fall in that same category?
Yeah, electrolyte powders. Yeah. And again, if you are a super heavy sweater and you need those extra electrolytes, great. There's a ton of options on the market, but they're really expensive, and most general athletes aren't necessarily needing that amount all the time. If you're sick, that's a great way to get additional things in as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes, any other questions? Okay. Yes.
I don't even know where to start with this. Like, older parent, right? So I've been out of the public school system for a very long time. So I have like 30 years. I have a pre-K-er, and I'm eldest daughter recovering perfectionist. So I'm not trying to be that perfect. I'm trying to not have that isolated child or the rebellious child. But I'm really struggling with the food menu. I'm not trying to be on a pedestal. I appreciate that we still have very affordable food in the public school system. I'm actually pretty surprised that it's still like a low dollar amount. But like pre-K too, it's like they have a snack, they have a group snack, they have these estimation jars, the bus driver's giving them candy, so I'm just looking at this, I'm like, this is like 8 times a day, 5 days a week, and this is the beginning. And so I'm trying to figure out, how do I navigate this? Like, it's like, I can't afford to go, put both of my kids in a private school, but the food that's available, right now my kid is so young, she doesn't really get a lot of decision making on her own, right? You can't go through this snack line, but only because of the age. It's coming to I looked at the menu, it's like ice cream and cookies and they're just this free-for-all. And so I'm a little bit interested in how we go about navigating what is now the norm available, free will.
So that's a great question, and you are not alone in that question. I think this is where, going back to that division of responsibility, and when you're like, well, I'm not there to make those decisions when they're out of the home, but thinking about what you can choose when she is, or he, your child is, when they're at home with you. And also just empowering you, because I have a 2nd grader, and she is allowed to get ice cream. So again, dietitian, my kid buys for lunch 95% of the time here. She likes the school lunches. So I know she's gonna eat and be fueled. So I'm all for it, and it is very affordable. And so I'm grateful for that, but she could technically buy ice cream every single day, but we have a conversation and we say, hey, what day do you want to have ice cream? She said, I like it on Fridays because it's, one of my neighbors taught me, Friday, your wife. And so she gets an ice cream and it's a conversation we have. So knowing that along with your child as it continues, that my kid's totally fine with it. She hasn't pushed back, but she also knows she gets plenty of fun foods at home too, because we find that balance of the grow foods and the fun foods. So she hasn't created this idea of, I gotta figure out how to eat ice cream every day at school because I never see it again, you know?
And that's it. And I like a little bit, like my degree is also exercise and sports science,
Mhm.
nutrition, and I was a collegiate athlete, so like my brain is definitely like fuel and performance
Yes.
and all that, but also being a woman and
Mhm.
like I was very skinny when I was in high school, and so that like became like the whole identity, and like I look back at it in hindsight, and then hit puberty, and was like, oh my gosh, there's 3 digits on the scale, and there was a section in that adolescence that was definitely a undiagnosed disorder.
Mhm.
While trying to be an athlete and stuff, and so like I have 2 daughters, and so I'm trying to balance all of that along with the psychological side of it as well.
The true reality of the food environment that we live in is you just have to make a lot of decisions all the time, you know? And so that's just what you're teaching them, just like everything else in the world that we live in, right? You're teaching them those skills and how you make those decisions rooted in a healthy relationship with food. But that doesn't mean never, but it doesn't mean always. You know, so what does that look like when it's always available, I think is what you were saying, like it's always available and around. So how do we then filter that through a healthy filter? And, you know, I think the way modeling it at home is what Kate's saying too, right? If you're modeling, the kids that never have exposure at home because we're only gonna have fun foods out are the ones that like, that's the birthday party, that's all they're thinking about is the cake. Because they never get it, you know, or yeah, they never have chips at home, so I'm gonna beeline to go buy the chips at the school line, right? So figuring out how to balance it and teaching them how to do that in the food environment that we live in, which is called an obesogenic environment. It's really easy to get delicious tasting, low nutrient dense foods all the time, everywhere on every corner, right?